If they win that, then they, like you said, would be set up for Belgium. And while Belgium are really, really good, that's still avoiding Spain, France, Germany, Argentina, Brazil, whoever. The path for the quarterfinals is wide open.
For us to have a good pathway, we have to end first in our group, and this is something that it should be favored to do.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Inside American Soccer, and we are here for episode 4, a special episode reacting to the World Cup draw that just happened. Yes, the United States has learned their group stage opponents. We're going to break it down, what all of it means, what all the permutations are, what we're excited about, and Tab, we are excited. I'm your host, Tom Bogert, joined as always by Tab Ramos, one of the U.S. soccer's best ever players, a very successful U.S. U20 Youth International coach. Tab, the ping pong balls bounced. Weirdly, FIFA decided that they are going to be the authority on peace and gave out a prize to Donald Trump. Kevin Hart was there because he needs a job. He doesn't work enough, and so he had to be there. Why wouldn't he be? Wayne Gretzky's there, did not brief himself on how to pronounce Curacao, among others. And there was a whole lot of cringe in the 90 minutes before we got to the World Cup draw actually happening. Tab, you were invited to go to the draw, but we kind of held you back because you were here to do this show. I got to tell you, it's snowing in Washington, D.C., and that was a very, very long ordeal. Tab, are you disappointed that you're sitting here and you're not still filing out of the Kennedy Center?
Hey, there's very few things that are good about getting old, but this is one of the good ones that to not go to stuff like this. I mean, where do we start, right? Kevin Hart, I mean, I know you're saying he needs a job, but on YouTube, I see him every other commercial is Kevin Hart. So I don't think he needs a job.
Exactly.
Yeah, obviously Wayne Gretzky. There's not a lot of hockey being played in Curacao, so he's likely not knowing that name, right? But overall, I have to say, pretty happy day. I mean, we got the absolute, possibly the best draw we could get. We're playing teams we know. I think Group B, Pot 2 was going to be the one that was going to dictate where we went and how this was going to go. And by getting Australia in that group, I think we ended up being in good shape. But yeah, overall, it's a little bit of a circus. I get it. And no, I'm happy to be home and not be in DC right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think the snow coming in early December in DC really set the tone for what the day would be. Listen, we want to get to the soccer. That's all you and I really care about. But I also wanted to just get to the soccer the whole time during the draw. So because FIFA decided to do what they did, I'm going to take a minute here to shred the pomp and circumstance and everything that just happened. It's good to joke about. I'm glad we laughed. That's the best way to get through the misery of what that was. Honest to God, who was this for? Who asked for this? Who wanted this? Outside of maybe Gianni Infantino, maybe the United States government, maybe a couple other really powerful people. Does any average fan want any of that? Does any average fan want Rio Ferdinand doing skits, jokes within the arena that did not get a single laugh the entire time? I was cringing the entire time. The fact that FIFA is making a peace prize, why? I don't understand. Who is this for? I don't understand how FIFA can continue to be so out of touch. The best way I can sum it up is my expectations were low, but my God, they still did not come close to that. So Tab, let's finally get into the soccer. All right, I've had enough of the red carpet, the Tom Brady jokes, everything else. At least Shaquille O'Neal was funny. That was the bright spot. But let's talk about some soccer. The United States leading Group D. They got a very, very favorable draw. Australia, Paraguay, and the UEFA playoff winner, which will be one of Turkey, Slovakia, Romania, or Kosovo. Now I sound like Wayne Gretzky. So Tab, big picture thought, what a favorable draw.
Well, I think you have to say that, right? And always with the disclaimer that every game is tough. And you're going to go to the World Cup, and it's not like these teams are going on vacation. This is the real deal, right? So every game is going to be difficult. Having said that, I think if, Turkey is likely the best of the European group that we can potentially play. And if we play Turkey, these are, Paraguay, Australia, Turkey are 3 of the last, 5 opponents we've had already this year. Yeah. So I think we're in a great place. I like our matchup with Paraguay, although I do feel Paraguay in a one-off will be much more difficult than they were in a friendly game in the middle of October in the U.S. Australia, obviously, we played them in Colorado. Australia's Australia. They're a hardworking team.
Mhm.
Give nothing away in terms of the fact that they have good players. But we're better than Australia. There's no other way to say it. And then we'll see what happens with the Turkey group. If they get through, Turkey will be difficult. They already beat us, but I think we beat ourselves a little bit more than Turkey beat us when we played them. So the reality is, this is a very good group for us, and it forced me to look past this group and say, hey, we likely don't have a really tough matchup until round of 16, where we could potentially beat Belgium, meet Belgium. So
Yep.
I think this is a great draw. This is a great draw.
I do think it's important to echo what you said. I don't want to sound disrespectful to these other teams. They're all here on merit. They're all really good. There is no such easy game at a World Cup. You know that better than anybody. But there are harder games. And there was a whole lot of harder opponents on the board here. Just, again, Australia pot two. We avoided Colombia, Croatia, Uruguay, Ecuador, and a handful of others that I think would have been more difficult than Australia, particularly after the United States just beat Australia. And I thought they were very handedly the better team. And like you said, just kind of no two ways around it. I think this is a better team, and I think neutrals would say the same. With no disrespect to Australia, right? Like I'm trying to walk the line here that I'm not sounding like we're jumping for joy about this as if it's going to be a cakewalk, but it could have been much, much harder. Norway was in pot three. We avoided Norway. Again, Paraguay are a good team. They're a very, very feisty team. They defend well. They play well in transition. They have some special players that can hurt you in attack, but they don't have Holland, right? This could all have been worse. And Tab, right before the show, we were double checking. Okay, if they win the group, they have to win the group, right? If they win the group, then who do they play in the round of 32? Okay, who would they play then in the round of 16? So our first takeaways are like, this is going to be a massive disappointment if they don't look good in the group. Like, I think that they have to win the group.
I think there's no doubt that's what has to happen. We'll be the favorites in the group to win it. And here's one thing I look at. We in 19, and I'll go a little bit into this later on, but in 1990 we hadn't qualified to the World Cup for 40 years. But since 1990, you look at all the World Cups, we haven't really had a U.S. team play a game in the World Cup that they're supposed to win and not win it. I mean,
wow.
we listen.
Wow.
We criticize teams, right? So you can go all the way to 1998 World Cup, and we can talk about we lost to Iran 2-1.
Mm-hmm.
We likely were the favorites in that game, but I'm not sure by how much. In our minds, we were favorites, but I'm not sure by how much. But then if you look at the World Cup before, we weren't favored in any games. We won one. And the World Cup before that, we had 3 Europeans in our group. We definitely weren't favored. And then you look at the World Cups ahead of that, and there hasn't been. American teams have always come through in the World Cup. And if we just do what we're supposed to do in this one, we should be in first place in this group.
I completely agree. And when we're talking about the draw in the abstract, honestly, the only way that you could make an argument that there was an easier path would have been because every group has to have at least one European team, which is why when Paraguay came up in pot three, that pot four had to be one of these playoff winners for the European. So that's going to be a stronger pot four team, but the United States got favorable draws in pot two and pot three. The only other way that this could have been argued of pick your dream kind of draw. Maybe if you got Scotland in pot three and then Cape Verde in pot four. But again, that's splitting hairs. And the expectations for this group, for this team has to be to win the group for me. I know it will be for Mauricio Pochettino, the staff in the locker room. They hopefully would have felt that same way no matter who that they drew. But particularly now, the pressure is going to be on. And it'll be I think back to the 22 World Cup. Against Wales, expected to win. Against Iran, expected to win. Against England, it was a good draw. But it was, okay, they have to take the game to us. And in these games, again, particularly Australia and Paraguay, the United States, the impetus is going to be on them to break down the other team, to implant their will on the game rather than reacting to the other team. And anything less than 6 points from those two games is going to be a very big disappointment. It's going to be heavily criticized, and obviously weird things happen in one-game sample sizes, but that's the World Cup, man. That's the pressure that's here. And like you said, if they top the group, they would face, in the round of 32, one of the third-place teams, because this is an expanded World Cup. It's not just the top two to get through. It's too difficult to try to figure out who one of the third-place teams could be. If they win that, then they, like you said, would be set up for Belgium. And while Belgium are really, really good, that's still avoiding Spain, France, Germany, Argentina, Brazil, whoever, as a potential, like, the path for the quarterfinals is wide open.
Yeah, but so here's where it gets a little interesting, right? Because coming in first place in that group gives you that headway to first you draw a third place team. Who knows? Obviously, we can say what groups, but it's so hard to speculate. Third place team
Too
among
many
so
ifs.
many teams, right? So there's too many ifs. But you likely are supposed to win that game. You win that game, and now you meet Belgium. But here's the interesting part: if for some reason we end second in our group, which I think would not be where we want to be or we deserve, you
Yep.
potentially meet Argentina right after your first. You
Oh,
play a G2, which could be Iran, could be Egypt, could be one of those teams, but then you would play Argentina. So instead of Belgium, you'd have Argentina. So I think, all teams look at this. When you start the tournament, obviously you're going to get the same line, one game at a time. The whole thing.
of
But the
course.
reality is, for us to have a good pathway, we have to end first in our group, and this is something that it should be favored to do.
Absolutely, and obviously we're all gonna intimately learn every detail about these teams. Again, like you're gonna watch the coaching staff are gonna be watching the other team in like warm ups and stuff after having studying them for so long, knowing what they're gonna do, even in little small sided games. But these are already opponents that the United States knows very well. Again, if we're assuming that it is Turkey that gets out of that playoff, they lost to Turkey in June, then they beat both Paraguay and Australia over the last two breaks in October and November. So these are three opponents that they will have already played within the last 12 months leading into a World Cup, which I think is pretty unique. I have not done research to definitively say this, but I doubt that this is very often the case in the history of the U.S. So is there extra challenges? Is there extra, I guess, comfort, particularly for the two teams that the United States beat? Of like, oh no, like yeah, we just saw it. We're not talking in the abstract about, hey, what will Miguel Almiron look like against Joe Scally or insert any defender because well, we just saw it.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. And I think not only should we be looking at this group because here's where the excitement goes, right? Because we can talk about our group, and now we can continue to talk about teams that we've already talked
Mm-hmm.
about, right? And so the reality is we're favored. We have to do our job, and pressure comes with that, and that's not easy, right? And that's not us being too hard on the U.S. team. This is
Yep.
the reality of the teams we have in front of us. We hope that 35 years from having qualified to a World Cup, that we're in a better place and that we should be able to take this group in first place. Now, having said that, let's think about the fun of this World Cup, right? Seeing Brazil against Morocco, seeing Portugal against Colombia. I mean, these are matchups we don't normally see. I'm psyched. I'm excited about this. This is going to be amazing.
I really am too. Like hell, even like I was watching the draw with some people, and like when Haiti got drew in the group with Brazil, Morocco, and Scotland. Like at first you're like, oh man, like that is a real uphill battle. But obviously, like their World Cup final was getting to the World Cup. What an incredible achievement for Haiti. Even if they lose 8-0 to Brazil, they're going to enjoy every second of that. And I just think that those kind of things are beautiful. You talk about Cape Verde, you talk about Curacao. Some of the other matchups, again, we'll dive into that a little bit later as well. But like France, Senegal, it's going to be
And by
awesome.
the way,
Senegal, Norway, that's the same group.
I'll say this about Haiti. So there was a player we had at NJSA 04, Duke LaCroix, who
Yeah.
plays for Haiti. And so after they qualified to the World Cup, I texted him, "Hey, Duke, it's so great to see you at the World Cup. This is going to be amazing." And now I'm going to have to text him again to say, "Hey, you're playing Brazil, my man. How great is
Not
that,
bad.
right?" I mean,
Not bad.
this is he and Fafa are two of my favorite guys
Yeah.
that I've ever coached, and I'll be so happy to see them there. Yeah.
One more thing before we dive into each opponent really quickly, because we won't know exactly who the third opponent is. It can be Turkey, Slovakia, Romania, Kosovo. Obviously Turkey is the strongest of that group, then probably Slovakia, but Turkey would be the heavy favorites. And if you're ranking who do you, I guess, not want to see, or who is, I think, the strongest potential opponent, it's Turkey with a bullet, and then I think it drops off several tiers. If there's an upset here, this has the possibility of becoming the easiest group.
Yeah, without question, because Turkey is not an easy opponent. I had the fortune of working for Besiktas about a year and
Yeah.
a half ago. I did some work as a a North American and South American director of scouting for them. And I have to tell you, I had the chance to attend some games. I attended Besiktas at Galatasaray. I got a chance to be on the field on some of those games where the stadiums are on fire. And I have to say, these players play under a lot of pressure. They're used to it. They're good players. And I think Turkey could definitely make a run if they get into this World Cup. I mean, if you're Turkey right now, you're thinking, man, we got to get through this playoff, because if we go to the World Cup, we're going to be first place in our group. I mean, if you're them, you have to think that, right?
It's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it.
By the way, if you're Paraguay, I think you're saying the same thing. I think you're saying, okay, we got a group here where we can be in first place and avoid Spain too. So it's not just us saying that this is going to be, and this is the fun part of being in a group like this, where I think anybody can win and anybody can be in any position. We just happen to think that we're the better team.
No, and I'm really glad you brought that up too, because obviously while we're talking about Australia or Paraguay, oh, what a favorable matchup. Literally every pot 2 team was hoping to draw the U.S., Canada, or Mexico, not because of disrespect, but because that's a hell of a lot better than England, Brazil, France, Argentina, right? So let's refocus back on the United States group. We're going to take a very quick break. So we're going to dive deeper into the 2 opponents we definitely know. And then I think we're just going to assume that Turkey is the third. And we're going to talk about that. Again, please rate, review, and subscribe to Inside American Soccer with Tom Bogert, Tab Ramos, wherever you get your podcast. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. And right before we dive very deep into the 3-ish World Cup opponents at the group stage, we've spoke on the show previously that depending on the group draw, that could maybe influence the last couple of roster spots, given there are a lot of good options for the 26-man roster. So, Tab, today, initially, again, we are less than an hour after this World Cup draw happened. Is there any players in particular that you feel might have gotten a slight boost to their World Cup chances based on this group, in that the United States are going to have to break teams down probably and have more of the ball than, say, if they got a much harder group?
Yeah, I mean, one comes to mind immediately, and that's Gio Reyna. I mean, he had his game against Paraguay. This is where we thought, okay, Gio Reyna's back. And I think if you're the coach, you were thinking, hey, had we drawn 2 European teams and maybe an Asian team, everybody's in the picture still. But now, you draw Paraguay, and you know that you have players who have been successful, Gio being one of them. I think if anything, this makes even more of a case for Gio Reyna than any other time, right? I mean, this is one. But I think in general, if you look at the roster for that game, it was a little bit of a heavier MLS roster. I think Aronson played that game as well. I think there's a lot of players that now will potentially, some players that could potentially be rescued because of this draw, because I think we can be successful with a lot of different combinations of guys now.
I do too. I think the only thought that I have based on that is this probably increases the chances of 4 center forwards being on the roster, just to have different options and different combinations in the attack tab, like you said. And also, there's going to be, given what the pool is, there are guys like Patrick Ajimang and Brian White, and Haji Wright isn't quite the physical presence that those guys are, but having an option of, all right, it's the 80th minute, they're sitting deep, we're just putting balls in a box. We need somebody who's an aerial threat, whether or not they were going to be one of the 3 forwards. So I think that could be a boost, that instead of, I don't know, a 6th center back, you bring a 4th forward. So that's the only thing that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to look at this, and you just mentioned, which is a great point, you just mentioned the 80th minute, but potentially you play Paraguay and Australia. What will they do against you? Chances are they're going to sit back and counter both of those teams.
Right.
So now if you're going to play a team that sits back, this is where you need those guys that break a team down, right? And you're going to need, like you said, additional forwards, but you also going to need likely to potentially think about using Weah as a winger. You likely going to have to open up teams. So I think there's a lot of possibilities with these teams, because we're the favorites to win these games, and we're going to have to open teams up, which, let's be fair, we have not been great at that when we've had a chance. But yeah, so I do agree with you on that. And I think even Turkey, for that matter, I'm not sure that Turkey go all out on us either, if they're the ones that come out of that group. So we're in a situation where we're likely going to have the ball on the opposing side of the field, and we're going to have to do something with it.
Yeah, I think that is the big takeaway here, and I'm very interested in that. I think that beats the alternative of bunkering and trying to hit and counter against one of the superpowers in the world. But hey, at some point, if they want to get to where they're going, they're going to have to beat or at least play very well against one of those powers. But for the group stage, they open against Paraguay. In a quick scouting report, again, people listening to this probably watched the game against Paraguay, so you're probably very familiar. What I think that they do best, and Tab, feel free to jump in wherever you either disagree. I think that they are very good in transition. They are excellent defending, and they don't give you anything easy. You have to earn every blade of grass against this Paraguay team. The work rate, even on set pieces, they're going to be really difficult to kind of get an opening on. This is going to be a very tough team in the literal sense, as we saw with that kind of coming together at the end of that Paraguay game that revolved around Alex Freeman. So I think that those are the pillars for this team. A couple of the players that should scare the United States. Miguel Almiron, but in Kiso and Diego Gomez, I think are three difference makers going forward, or potential difference makers. And then the U.S. can exploit this team by killing them with the ball and breaking them down, shifting them around. Yes, they have an incredible work rate and an incredible engine. Make them earn it. Make them have to, at every point, scrambling side to side, possession with purpose, but not letting them off the hook, not giving them a chance to really, establish that lower block, keep them moving around, and doing so with the ball.
Yeah, no question. I think what I'll add to that is the mentality of the Paraguayan player, right? Because you look at their three, their three neighbors to the southeast and west are Uruguay, Argentina, and Brazil. They have been neighbors to the three countries that win absolutely everything in South America for the last 120 years, and they're not afraid, and they know they have to fight. And I know that we can be going into this game thinking we are the better team against Paraguay, but I can tell you that not for a second are they going to be sitting in Paraguay thinking that they can't win this game against the U.S. Because they're thinking, you know what, they just beat us, and they're not going to beat us again, and that's going to be difficult. Now let's take the other side of it, and you mentioned, players like Enciso and Almiron. These are good players. These are like world class good players. And I know Almiron didn't have a great season this year at Atlanta, but we know what he's like. We know when the lights get turned on at the World Cup, that's where the real players show up, and I think he's one of those players. This Paraguay team will be more than a handful for us, and we're going to have to do a lot of work to break them down.
And particularly those three players, they're best in transition, and that is which part of it is they're going to sit deeper and again be difficult to play against, but that invites the U.S. forward, which is how they're going to have to try to break them down. So at any moment, giving space to Almiron or Enciso in particular, but Diego Gomez is really good at this too. Now with Brighton, those are three players that can hurt you in transition. So those are the things that the U.S. have to look out for. That is the opening game, which I'm extremely excited for. So when we're talking about the opening game, let's talk about starting 11s. Tab, I'll go first. I don't think this is any different than what I've previously written, so I'll run through it quick. Freese in goal. Back three of Miles Robinson, Chris Richards, Tim Ream. Midfield four of Dest, Adams, Tessman, Anthony Robinson. Dual tens of Pulisic and Weah. And I could probably be talked into Malik Tillman, particularly for this game, or Gio Reyna for this game. I think Gio Reyna for sure will play a part, whether he's able to start or if he's coming off the bench for a significant chunk. And then Balogun up top. So that's the 11 that I have.
Yeah, and I will go with, I think, something similar to what I've had. I'm going to go with Freese in goal. And in the back with, I'm going to go Freeman, Richards, and Miles Robinson. And I could go with McKenzie there too, one of those two. The four in front of them, I'm going to go Dest on one side, Robinson on the other side, if he's healthy. If not, totally fine going with Arvston. He's done a great job.
Right.
In the center is going to be Adams and McKinney. McKinney is at a good level again. It could be Tessman if we need a little bit more feet again. And then Tillman and Pulisic right behind Balogun. But that could also be Weah there, and it could also be Gio Reyna there. So a lot of options. I think Weah in a game like this where we need to open up an opponent, it's likely that Weah may get put out as a wide player, more as a wing back than one of the guys up top.
Yeah, the only issue is that like I toyed with that as well, but like Des is so good at unlocking defense and
Mhm.
being really creative in tight spaces. So at least for what Sim Weah might not have in that biggest strength, the combo of Des and Weah on the right flank or in the right channel as well would be pretty strong. So that's Paraguay. Next opponent is Australia. What do Australia do well? They defend. They defend very well. They are difficult to play against. It's a different brand of defending. It's more rigid, I think, than Paraguay's, and they also are going to try to open up in transition. I don't think that they're as good as Paraguay, particularly in that regard. But this is a team that's going to defend very well, not be afraid of the moment. They did give the U.S. a decent game. I don't think the U.S. played particularly great against Australia, and they're probably thinking, okay, with a better lineup, with a better performance, this should be easier. Some players that concern you for Australia: Nestoroi Irankunda, a young player for Watford, and the goalkeeper Matt Ryan. That again for a pot two team, it could be much worse. How the U.S. are going to have to exploit this team: possession and pressing, both breaking teams down, but immediately counter pressing when the ball is lost. And again, even more important than I think against Paraguay is don't give this team a moment to rest. Continue to put them under pressure with and without the ball, and chances will come. And it's about getting it past Matt Ryan.
Not a lot to add to this Australia team. I really, unfortunately, obviously don't want to be disrespectful to any team. They're all good teams. And I think, by the way, I commend Australia for going into the Asian Federation to get more competition because they could have stayed on the Oceania side and played New Zealand every year just to go to the World Cup. But they've done a better job to get more competitive. Having said that, I think Iran Kunda, as you said, could be dangerous. He's a 19-year-old. By the World Cup next summer, with a little bit more experience, a little bit stronger, he can be a handful. But man, there's just not a whole lot to worry about overall. I mean, we can come up with the names, but I think they're not at the level we are. This is a team we should beat, and if we play our game, the only way Australia is going to beat us is if they outwork us. And I don't see a U.S. team being outworked at home in a World Cup. I don't see it.
I couldn't agree more. You talk about qualifying. So part of the reason that they wanted to go through Asia because Oceania, you only get through with a playoff, I believe, or previously it was with the playoff when it was a 32 team World Cup. And like you said, they're getting much more difficult opponents. So them qualifying through Asia is no small feat. In the final round of qualification, they finished second in their group of six to get direct qualification to the World Cup, finishing behind only Japan. But they had only 16 goals in 10 matches. And some of those matches include two against Bahrain, China, Indonesia, which just kind of shows they don't have the same kind of edge going forward or the players that can really, really hurt you and concern you. This is going to be a team that's built defensively, but they still finished behind Japan and struggled against that team. And I think Japan is more of a comparison to the United States than Australia is. Again, there are no easy games at the World Cup, but the U.S. has to be very, very happy with that. And then the third opponent will be, again, the winner of the playoff between Turkey, Slovakia, Romania, Kosovo. Let's just assume this is Turkey because we can always change this and talk more about it when these playoffs happen in the spring. But right now, let's work under the assumption it's Turkey. My first question to you before even diving into it, I think Turkey would be the hardest of the three opponents. Guess that wasn't a
Yeah,
question. That was just a
yeah,
statement, wasn't it?
yeah. Well, I was you finished that, and then I was waiting for the question. So
That's a
okay,
New Jersey question, you know?
okay. Sorry
Just
about
give an
that.
opinion.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's my fault. That's
I
my
didn't.
fault.
Not following your line of questioning.
That's on me.
Yeah. Turkey would be the most difficult, and by the way,
I'm saying over Paraguay and Australia,
yeah.
not just
I agree.
like okay.
I agree with you. I just think that this team has played a lot of big games. Obviously, they lost to Spain 6 or 7-0 in one of the games. Let's not forget in European qualifying, but they did well in all the rest of the games, including their last game against Spain. They have Arda Guler, one of the youngest, best players in the world. Um, and yeah, that would be if they come into our group, that would be the toughest team to beat in our group. And we end with them. So it's likely that we're going
Yep.
into that third game already knowing that we likely have 6 points. And if you
Right.
have 6 points going into the third game, now you're playing to try to avoid being on Argentina's side and being more with Belgium for
Hmm.
your second. So you're now afforded to take a few chances.
Agreed, but that will be in that scenario it would still be very crucial again to finish first and not second. So I think that that'll still be a really important game. Like there's sometimes in the past where that third game becomes a dead rubber because everybody knows where they're qualifying, or you're playing against a team that you're either vastly inferior to or superior to, and that both teams can pretty safely assume, all right, that's going to be the first place team, that's going to be the second. This group is wide open, as we've said 15 times already, and if it comes in where Turkey and the United States are both sitting on 6 points, I think both will really go at each other for this game to top the group. Talking more specifically about this team, I think that they do a lot of things well. They possess well, but they do set pieces. Like Hakan Çalhanoğlu is one of the best set piece takers in the world, and that is a very important quality at a knockout round at a World Cup tournament. There's Çalhanoğlu, who's obviously very, very good. You talked about Arda Güler, their best player. Kenan Yildiz maybe could be their best player as well of Juventus. Kaan Ujan, Erkan Koku. This like young core that's going forward again, and Çalhanoğlu is the more veteran presence. But this like young core of Güler, Yildiz, Uzan, and Koku, those are some players, man. Like this team has a lot of talent.
And Çalhanoğlu's got the shot from mid distance. I mean, this guy can
Yeah.
hit a ball. I mean,
Yes,
he
he
can hit a
can.
ball like very few people in the world can. No,
Hmm.
this is a dangerous team with good players. But they have to get through those groups, and in Europe, it's hard to get out of groups like this. If they do, they will be the team to beat in the group for us.
I totally agree on that front. The United States lost to Turkey in June. That team, let's just call it what it is. They were in a very bad way at that point, and they're in a much better spot right now. That team didn't have Christian Pulisic. That team was not playing the 3-4-2-1 that has worked so well. They did not seem to have an identity. So while Turkey was much better than the United States on the day, it was only 2-1. I think Turkey was more than that. Like I thought that they were in control. But then friendlies happen and there's a lot of subs. But I think this would be a very difficult opponent. And while they look much better than us, we've gotten better since that point. So I think that is a very important part. As we continue to establish, first place in the group has to be the expectation. There is legitimate pressure on this group to succeed. And the fun part about having a favorable draw is thinking about the possibilities, but it's hard and it's going to be pressure to actually go on and do it. Tab, in 1990, things were a little bit different for the United States program. You said earlier in the show, that was the first World Cup that we qualified for in 40 years. You were part of that team. You guys got a very hard draw. What is the differences? And I guess what is, going back to that moment in that time, what were you kind of, remembering from those days, or what comes to mind between the difference between then and now?
Yeah, really, really interesting, actually, because it sort of sets me back. I start to think about the fact that we are thinking right now about we're going to be disappointed if our team is not in first place in a group in a World Cup, and back then we were trying to qualify to World Cup when we had not been to a World Cup in 40 years. So for us to even say that we thought we could qualify would be exaggerating because we didn't think we could qualify until we had one game left. So, but here's the neat thing, and this is what I love. The part about how much soccer has come along in the last 35, 40 years. We were playing World Cup qualifiers at St. Louis Soccer Park, which I think was called the Budweiser Park or something at the time. And I think the capacity was about 6,000 people. And I remember
Jesus.
the first time we pulled in with the bus with the US team and we saw no more tickets and we sold out St. Louis Soccer Park. That was a big deal. I mean, there are a lot of big games that I've played that I forgot. People come up to me all the time. Hey, remember this, remember that? And I don't remember a lot, mostly because I'm old, but I don't remember a lot. But I tell you what, I remember I remember the day we sold out St. Louis Soccer Park. That was a big deal. So to think, and then we went on, we qualified to the World Cup. It was practically a miracle that we did. And then we got drawn into a group with 3 European teams, including the host. So it was almost like, yeah, thanks for coming, but your tickets are already set for you to go home, like before the first round is over for everybody else. So, and now look at where we are, right? 40 years later, we're hosting a World Cup and we're the leaders of Group D, and we're hoping to win Group D. I mean, I couldn't be more excited about how far this has come along.
And Sab, I know you won't say it yourself because you're a humble guy, but like that, the foundation, like where we are, those expectations, the foundation was laid by you and your teammates in that era. So I'm sure it's particularly sweet and prideful and just honestly probably surreal to your point, Tab, like of, oh my God, we sold 6,000 tickets to a World Cup qualifier. Or, you tell me what the feeling was around the team of echoing like smaller countries that qualified for this World Cup of like, hey, Curacao, much different than the United States, but still in their footballing development. We talk about Haiti, Curacao, Cape Verde, insert a lot of these other kind of smaller teams that are making the World Cup for the first time. And that final game to qualify for the World Cup was their World Cup final. And then you're just kind of happy to be there. Was that part of the feeling for your group? Again, as competitive as I know you are and know all of them are, it was so important just to get there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a different time. And by the way, I'm so excited about countries like Cape Verde and
Me
Curacao and
too.
Haiti because I know that feeling. I know the feeling they have, and it's a tremendous feeling. It's of accomplishing something that nobody thought you could, and and that's neat. And that doesn't necessarily mean money or anything like that. All it means is like you're happy, and it's a memory that you have for the rest of your life. And I think that's the most important part. So I'm very happy for those players. Yeah, and for us, I mean, to show you the difference of where we were. I mean, John Harkes and I used to drive together. This is before the World Cup, maybe 6-9 months before, to prepare for a game. Sometimes John Harkes and I used to drive across to Brooklyn to play for the Brooklyn Italians for a couple $100 a game. Yeah. So people want to compare sometimes, and they say, "Oh, this player. How can you compare a player from the past to a player of today?" But you can't. You can't because we had nothing. And from there, you're supposed to land the contract at a big European club. How would that even happen? The fact that we even got there was an absolute miracle. And the fact that, John Harkes ended up at Sheffield Wednesday, I ended up at Figueres, and then at Betis, and Eric Winalda ended at Bochum or wherever else. I mean, these were all little miracles more than anything else.
Did anybody recognize you when you were playing for the Brooklyn Italians and like, hey, what the hell are you doing in this league?
Yeah, of course. We were a big deal. We were a big deal in those leagues. Are you kidding?
Could you imagine showing up for, and again, I know it's not exactly Sunday league, but it certainly ain't professional. Could you imagine showing up and I'm warming up and I'm like, is that fucking Tab Ramos? Are you kidding me? What is it? What am I in for today?
I'll tell you where it helped. It helped in the sense that we played our home games at Brooklyn College, and the turf field is so hard. But that wasn't the most difficult part. The difficult part was that people would hit you with umbrellas as you're going down the sideline. So the fact that we were known a little bit helped us to not get hit with an umbrella when you went down the sideline.
Oh my goodness. Proper football, man. That is football heritage in this country. That's beautiful.
I'd like to tell you a better story about how great it was, but it really wasn't.
No, that is the best story. That is the best story right there. Again, I just can't put myself in the minds of like some other player that's getting $100 or something. It's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I can't compete with this.
By the way, 6 months later, we were playing against Baggio in Rome at the World Cup.
Unbelievable. Oh my God. If there was no better way to tell how things have changed. Whereas now, you look at Pulisic and McKinney and everything that these players have and have grown to. Again, starting with the foundation of what you guys built. We're talking about Pulisic playing in the Milan Derby, not playing for the Brooklyn Italians, getting ready for a World Cup. Oh, it's just delightful.
Yep.
This has been great. There's been, if just really quickly to talk about some of the other teams here at the World Cup. We're obviously focusing on the United States. We've got to look around. Right now, I've seen some betting odds come out. Spain are the betting favorites, followed in order by England, France, Brazil, and Argentina. So those are the 5 favorites, according to the bookmakers. And then in terms of group of death, there's a couple options. And group of death is going to lose a little bit of its luster now, where you can be third place and qualify. Whereas in the past, it was only the top 2 at the previous World Cups. But for me, and you tell me what the group of death is. It's either this one, England, Croatia, Ghana, and Panama, or France, Senegal, Norway, and then the winner of a playoff that will be Bolivia, Iraq, or Suriname. But the France, Senegal, Norway part of that is what makes it the group. What could make it the group of death? Which one of those two do you believe is the hardest group?
Wow, that's a good call on those groups being potentially the most difficult. And I agree with you. Group of death is kind of like a tough term when three can qualify, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go with the France, Senegal, Norway, because I think if any of those three teams get hot, including I will include Senegal, if any of those
I
three
agree.
teams get hot, they can go win the whole thing. And
Yeah.
so I would pick that group slightly over the England,
Mhm.
Croatia, Ghana, Panama, because that will be a very that's a difficult group, the England, Croatia, Ghana, Panama, because it's so even. England always disappoints a little bit at World Cups, especially in first round. And because of that, they probably drop a couple points. And I think
Right.
because of that, this will be a crazy group, I feel.
As for our other co-hosts, Mexico are with South Africa, South Korea, and then a European team to be determined later. And Canada are with a European team to be determined later. That could be Italy, Qatar, and Switzerland. I don't think that was the worst case scenario for Canada, but it certainly won't be easy. And I was with Jesse Marsh this week ahead of the draw, and what his messages to the locker room, to the team, is it's not just about getting out of the group, which that is the ultimate goal. It's we want to top the group, because if we top the group, we get to stay and play in Canada moving forward. So that's where things are set for the other co-hosts for the World Cup. Again, we will be talking plenty about the World Cup. That is what this show is. We are focused on the United States national team. Everything's built towards the World Cup. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit of Mexico and Canada here and there along the way. But Tab, this was fun. I'm glad that we did this much more efficiently than the World Cup draw itself. I'm sorry I didn't bring in a word for you. I probably should have brought something, made up something for us, but I came empty-handed. I'm sorry.
I think we needed an award. I think an award to the tallest guy would have fit today for me.
Well,
It would have been perfect to go with the celebration.
Yeah, I think that would not have been the most absurd thing that came from the day.
Right.
Listen, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tab, first and foremost. Thank you to iHeart. Everybody listening, please rate, review, and subscribe. Inside American Soccer. We will be back very soon. We got a lot of fun stuff planned coming up. So, again, please subscribe, and thank you very much for listening.